Welcome everybody to another pure variant deck build. I'm Josh and this is one of my favorite newer archetypes. I did a deck build recently on this, but that was before the last two archetype cards came out in Power of the Elements, which has elevated this deck drastically. It allows it to do so much more, and I'll go through that shortly. So if you guys are familiar with what Tyler and I do at the Misplay, you're not going to see access code, you're not going to see Appaloosa, you're not going to see all these crazy out of archetype cards in the extra deck. It's just Exosister Monsters. In the main deck, it's going to be the best tech cards we can find to bring out the most out of this archetype. No hand traps. So if you guys are a fan of that kind of format, definitely stick around, let us know what you guys want to see, and I'll get stuck into this deck right away. So to start with, because it is pure, the extra deck is very, very simple. We mean pure in the purest sense. So Exosisters Magnifica, the latest Xyz monster for the archetype. This is finally the boss monster which we want to see. Has a once per turn quick effect to banish, and then it can tag itself out with one of its materials to get a potentially another effect. And that one, which will generally be, to get the most out of it, will be Exosister Michaelis. Michaelis is a quick effect banish on the turn it is summoned. And it does detach one to search an Exosister spell or trap. So this is also very, very important. The reason why we want to overlay Magnifica onto Michaelis is because after we've used Magnifica's quick effect banish, we can use its other effect to tag out, use itself as material, overlay into Michaelis. Michaelis will then get another banish as well. So essentially, this gets 2 banishes per turn if we use Michaelis as material. So very, very important to do so. I definitely think it's a 3 of because it searches and it banishes. Next, we run Asophil. I'm not going to go into all the effects. All of them essentially have 2 effects. But this one is essentially a bounce, which is, you know, any kind of non-destruction removal is getting more and more important in the game of YGO. So a very, very good card to run. We run Jabreen, which is the 800 attack boost, which is probably the least, yeah, it is definitely the least important. But I encourage you guys to look up all of the Exosister Xyz monster effects because they do have niche applications, like one stops monster effects activating in the graveyard, one stops special summoning from the graveyard, so they can definitely shut down certain decks. So Jabreen definitely does have her high points. And then one of my favorites is Exosister Caspatel. Caspatel will discard to search an Exosister monster, which is so good being able to have those searches. And all of these, besides Magnifica, can be Xyz summoned using one as material if you meet the requirements. Magnifica is the only one which you do specifically need to overlay 2 of these to go into this. But it's definitely worth it. So that is the extra deck. Like I said, it is the pure in the purest sense, but the main deck is where we like to see some of the tech cards and the best ratios for our kind of competitive but casually pure variant format. So firstly, the brand new card is a playset of Exosister Martha. This is an absolute 3 of if you're playing Exosisters. This card is absolutely phenomenal. If we control an Xyz monster, then, or no monsters, we can special summon this card from hand, then special summon Exosister Elise directly from the deck. So essentially, off a free summon, we get an additional card. So she allows 2 free summons, including herself and Elise, directly from the deck. That's already really amazing. The other thing that makes Martha extremely good and allows this deck to be more consistent is the fact that Exosister rely on our opponent moving cards from either graveyard themselves. If we're moving cards from graveyards, it doesn't do anything. It doesn't trigger the monster effects. Martha kind of says, to hell with it, I'm gonna activate my effect anyway. So what she will do, she gets the same thing where you can Xyz summon using only her as material for an Xyz monster, which is good. But she will activate even if we move a card from the graveyard. So if any card is moved from the graveyard, you can then Xyz summon, which is extremely powerful. So very, very good. I absolutely adore Martha. She helps you play through interruptions. She helps you extend your combos. She is such a powerful piece within this archetype, a much needed card for the Exosister archetype. Next, we're going to be running 3 Exosister Sophia. So the rest of the Exosister main deck monsters will have that effect where if your opponent moves a card from either graveyard, Xyz summon using this card as material. So you don't need to use 2, you can just use 1, which is very, very powerful because that's when you can get those niche Exosister Xyz effects to interrupt your opponent or use a floodgate for 1 turn against your opponent. Very powerful. The reason why Sophia is the second best of the deck is because if we control Sophia and we control another Exosister monster, we can draw 1 card. That's it. Very, very good. A free draw is always going to be a powerful, powerful effect. Next, we run Exosister Stella. Same effect, where if opponent moves a card from the graveyard, etc., they all have that. Exosister Stella is very good because it allows us a special summon of an Exosister monster from hand once per turn. So Stella just is a combo starter or combo extender, depending on how you go about it. Stella is just a very, very good card to run. Exosister Elise. What makes her great is she can special summon herself from the hand if we control an Exosister monster, but she is the one which will also be special summoned with Martha. Martha won't special summon any of the other Exosister monsters except Elise, so it's very important that we always have an Elise available. Elise is never a dead card. It's alive in the deck. It's alive in the hand. A free special summon is always going to be good, and it has that same effect where it will Xyz summon it using only itself, so very good. The weakest of the Exosister monsters is Exosister Irene. This is definitely one you can tech out. You have to run this at 1 if you're running Exosisters, but you can definitely get rid of 2. Play a couple Ash Blossoms, Ghost Ogres if you want to make it a bit more competitive. But because it's pure and the way that I run it, there's a particular trap card, Exosister Vardis. Which kind of requires me to play all 3 because otherwise if I only run 1 then Sophia's locked in the deck, and I'll explain why after. What Irene does, the reason why she's not as good, once per turn we can draw a card and then pop 1 card, an Exosister card to the bottom of the deck. So not very good because it's not really hand advantage, it's more of just like a mallet. And it has to be an Exosister monster that we're putting back, so not the best, but I'll explain why I run 3 Irene shortly. The last of the monsters, I run a playset of Diana the Light Spirit. Kind of fits in theme, it's more of an angelic light monster. The reason why this isn't the best anymore, I advise if you do want to make it a bit more competitive, absolutely run hand traps in place of Diana the Light Spirit. I was running it as a way to ensure that I can play through some interruptions. Banish a light monster from grave, special summon this. It's a generic level 4 light monster. I can go into any of my Xyz monsters. The reason why it's not as good anymore is Martha. The turn we activate Martha's effect, we can't special summon any other monsters beside Exosister monsters. So Martha does have a very hard lock within the archetype. So if we activate Diana and then we somehow draw into Martha or we attempt to activate Martha's effect, we can't because we've special summoned something else other than Diana the Light Spirit. It's similar to Pot of Duality, so this isn't the most useful right now in the build, but it does allow us to continue playing if we don't open the Martha, or we can't search the Martha, or it's maybe turn 2 or 3 and we don't have the Martha right now. Diana the Light Spirit can definitely allow us to help in combos. And for a build where maybe if you can't get your hand on Martha at all, Diana the Light Spirit's a fantastic card. I would run this. I would run Chaos Valkyria as well. They essentially do the same thing. And they allowed you to keep playing through interruptions when your opponent would stop you from normal summoning or Xyz summoning. So very, very good. Next for the spells, we're running Exosister Pax. This is the best spell card in the deck. It is essentially a special summon from the deck. So its first part of its effect is search an Exosister monster from deck to hand. Then if we control or have in the graveyard the Exosister monster that's listed in its card text, we can special summon it from the hand as well. So the way this works, I'll give you guys a brief example. Irene, the worst of them, but she mentions Sophia in her card text, which means if we have Irene on the field or in the graveyard, we can search Sophia, but then special summon her right away. So this essentially is a special summon from the deck for 800 cost. Absolutely nothing, very, very powerful. Elise will special summon Sophia and vice versa. Irene will summon... Irene will do Sophia and vice versa, and then Elise will do Stella and vice versa. Martha, if you search Martha, Martha's just a search. Actually, no, you can, because she does Elise, you can special summon her as well, which I completely forgot about. So this is absolutely a 3-of. Any kind of free search card and potential special summon from the deck is always going to be insanely powerful. Have to run that at 3. Next, I run 3 copies of Armin. So this allows us to kind of circumvent the issue that Exosister kind of has. So Martha is really good because if any cards moved from the graveyard, whether it be us or our opponent, Martha will activate. Whereas the rest of the main deck monsters will only work if our opponent moves a card from either graveyard. This allows us as a quick play spell, generally kind of use it as a trap, where we can force that effect. We can Xyz summon an Exosister monster that we don't already control onto one of our main deck monsters on the field. So it kind of forces out that effect. You can only activate it in our turn if our opponent controls a monster special summon from the graveyard. So it is a bit hard to meet. But if during our opponent's turn, it doesn't matter what they have. So we generally play it as a trap to force out those, one-turn floodgates or maybe the Michaelis banish, something like that. So I like Armin a lot. You can definitely run it at 2 because Martha is now out. Maybe run a hand trap, something like that, or an interesting tech card if you guys can recommend one. But Armin just adds that consistency to the existing main deck monsters that couldn't force their effects out. Next, I run 2 copies of Carpe Diem. This card is insanely underrated. I don't see this card getting a lot of love. It does 2 things very, very well. The first one is kind of like a Harpy's Hunting Ground, where if our Exosister monster attacks, whether it's Xyz or main deck, we can destroy a spell or trap on the field. That's very good, just as a continuous spell being allowing us to pop, 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 and pop. Very, very good. The main reason why Carpe Diem is so astounding is if we Xyz summon an Exosister monster, once per turn, we can declare a card name and negate the effects of that card for the rest of the turn. So we can declare the name of Nibiru, we can declare the name of Ash Blossom. Doesn't come up in our format because we generally don't run hand traps, but if you know what your matchup is and you know what to kind of expect, you can definitely call the right card and your opponent can't activate it for the rest of the turn. So very, very good. And it happens in either turn. So we're always going to be Xyz summoning in our turn and our opponent's turn. So there's always going to be a card name, which we should have in the back of our heads to prevent our opponent from activating it. So I like Carpe Diem a lot. I don't like to run it at 3 because it bricks. Because it is a hard once per turn, but I feel like if I'm running it at 1, I very rarely see it because there are other spells and traps that I want to search with Michaelis. So 2 feels like the perfect ratio in all of the duels that I've done. Next, I run 1 copy of Called by the Grave. This will actually force out Martha's effect. Everyone knows how strong Called by the Grave is. Quick effect, banish, and negating the effects to the end of the next turn. But because a card's been moved from the graveyard, it activates Martha's effect. So good for 2 reasons. Absolutely run Called by the Grave in this deck. Kind of fits the theme as well. Couple Twin Twisters. Dealing with back row can be a pain. Us still needing to Xyz summon quite a bit and us hard summoning into Magnifica, which is quite important, which means we don't want to play through Solemn. So I like running the Twin Twisters. You can tech this out for more hand traps or some other tech cards you guys have. With Carpe Diem, being able to destroy spell and traps if an attack is declared involving an Exosister monster, or any Exosister monster, we can destroy spell or traps. So Twin Twisters isn't maybe the best for a lot of people, but for the format that Tyler and I play in, Twin Twisters is absolutely a must-have. It's always powerful to get rid of back row. 2 copies of Pot of Extravagance. Now, as amazing as the extra deck is, not every card is going to be as useful. And because it is a pure variant, we have a playset of every Exosister monster in here, which means, yes, we generally may want 2 copies of Michaelis instead of 3. We may want 1 copy of Asofiel, maybe none of Jabreen, maybe a couple of Caspatel, maybe 1 of Magnifica, because you can only hard summon it. Generally, that's the way if you were to do a more competitive meta, like a proper meta build, yeah, that maybe be the ratios, maybe none of those at all, maybe only a couple of them. In this format, it allows Extravagance to get rid of the cards we really probably won't use throughout the duel, and it's a free +2. So I love running the double Pot of Extravagance in this deck. When you're running pure variants like you guys have seen Tyler and us do before in our deck builds and our live duels, Pot of Extravagance can be hit or miss, because unless you've got an archetype where you can run 2 to 3 of every archetype extra deck monster to get rid of some of the ones you're never going to use anyway, if you can't do that, then Pot of Extravagance isn't great in the pure variant deck build. However, it's perfect in this deck. Very, very good. So this is like $1 now. So Pot of Extravagance, definitely a great card to run in this pure variant archetype. 1 Pot of Avarice, because we always seem to have Exosister monsters in the graveyard. What's bad about recycling cards in and drawing 2? The reason why this is also good as well, there is a trap card which does allow us to keep playing and interrupting our opponent. Pot of Avarice allows us to keep using that card, and that card is a playset of Exosister Vardis. Vardis allows us to special summon 2 Exosister monsters directly from the deck. They have to mention each other in their card text. So like I said before, Elise can get Stella and vice versa. Irene can get Sophia and vice versa. Martha can't be done because Elise doesn't mention Martha. So Martha's kind of the odd one out. But in regards to the original Exosister main deck monsters, you can get any of them. So the reason I run Irene at 3 is because if I've already used an Irene, my only Irene's in the graveyard if I'm running at 1 of, it means I can't summon Sophia from the deck. It means I'm limited to Elise and Stella. And if I don't have those, it means it's dead. So I run Irene at 3 to make sure that this card is always live. Special summoning 2 from the deck is always extremely powerful. And as a trap, you don't always have to use it in your opponent's turn. You can sit on it, wait for them to pass back to you if they haven't defeated you at that point. Special summon 2 from deck, and it allows you to Xyz summon if you want a hard Xyz summon. So Exosister Vardis is extremely versatile. I think it's an absolute 3 of. Very, very powerful card. I then run 2 copies of the new trap card, Exosister Returnia. This works very well with the new Exosister Martha. So it gives you a couple different effects to use. So if all monsters you control are Exosister monsters, minimum 1, we have to pay the life point costs, then target 1 card our opponent controls or in their graveyard, and then banish it. So it's essentially a quick effect trap card, banish from the field or grave, which is very good. We're always going to have an Exosister monster on the field. But then we get a second effect and we choose 1 of them. So immediately after that resolves, Xyz summon 1 Exosister Xyz monster using monsters you control. Now that does require you to use 2 monsters. So it does work very well with Vardis because we can only summon the original Exosister monsters. It means we do have to rely on our opponent to move cards from the graveyard. So if we activate this, and then once monsters on the field activate the Returnia, we can banish a card from our opponent's graveyard and then or field, and then activate its secondary effect to immediately Xyz summon to maybe get another banish or get a 1-turn floodgate. The other one is if we have Xyz summon this turn, we can banish 1 card our opponent controls. So it's very versatile. It could give us 2 banishes. It could give us a banish and an Xyz summon for more advantage. Very, very good. It is searchable, so I run it as a 2 of. I feel like it'll brick at a 3. 2 seems like the perfect fit. And then to round the deck off, 3 Solemn Strikes, very, very powerful. I don't like running Solemn Judgment in this deck because pretty much all of our spell and traps require 800 life point cost, so that's going to continue to whittle our life points down. So activating one can really put us in a bad spot. I like Solemn Strike because it's only 1500, it's barely anything at all, and monster effects are generally better to negate than something the Solemn Warning would, so I like the Solemn Strike. So that is about it for the pure variant deck build. There are some interesting tech cards. I like the ratios in that deck. Like I guys said, it is a pure variant of the build. So if you guys have any interesting tech cards you would like to see in this deck, please let me know. I adore this archetype. I want to make it as great as I can. So you guys are generally pretty good at leaving tech cards or ideas for some new cards or ways I could play it. We really appreciate that, and we're definitely going to be doing some more live duels with this deck. They were in the tournament that we did earlier in the year, so if you guys are interested to see how it's played, it was before Martha and Returnia came out, but it was still very fun, very good deck. So yeah, hope to hear from you guys more in the comments, and you'll definitely be seeing more of this deck. We hope you guys enjoyed that video. If you guys want to see any more live duels, deck builds, podcast episodes, tournament videos, or anything that you guys may want to see, let us know in the comments below. Please make sure to leave a like. Please subscribe. Tell us what you guys want to see. We love hearing from you guys.
100%. Every comment matters. We read every comment on the channel. On any video. Old, new, old, new, old, new. We read every comment.
Even if we don't respond to it, I give it a heart.
100%.
Everything.
100%. We read all of it, whether we respond or not. If you can tell your friends about us, if you know people that like Yu-Gi-Oh, please recommend it. This started out as a passion project, as a hobby, and we're just getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
Yeah, so that's about it from us at the Misplay. So we hope to see you guys in the comments, and we'll see you guys in the next video.
Deuces.